Welcome to the Be Dadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
And just like that, we're back, folks. Welcome back to the Be Dadly podcast. I'm Brandon Jones, your host. Today, I'm with a very special guest, Brandon Blinson. He is a trade and research analyst for Hardy Reid, and he is the father of two. He's also the co-host and co-founder of the Present Fathers podcast. And I'm very excited about doing this collaboration with him. We have a lot to get into today. Brandon has a very amazing story. We're going to hear about how he met his wife, which is something that we don't really hear about every day, just how wonderful it is. But these two have been together for 22 years. And I can tell you, if you're looking at this, you're watching this on YouTube, and you look at this man, you go, okay, what they mean at like 6? How'd that happen? And he's also a follower of Christ, and that's definitely in his work. And it's a beautiful thing. He's working on 2 books right now to get published. One is called Attached at the Heart, Not the Hip. It's all about relationships and really breaking that codependency. Has a deep foundation in that Christian way. And so that's in that book. And then he's also got a book about Jesus for kids. So he's got a lot of great things that he's doing in the world. I'm super, super excited to have him here with us. And Brandon, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I've got to hear a little bit about how you met your wife. I was scrolling through your through your Facebook, and I'm kind of doing a little research about you. And as I'm going through your profile pictures, I'm looking and I'm going, okay, his wife and him are now kids. How is this? How did they, meet, and how did this happen? But you've been with your wife a very long time. Tell me a little bit about how you guys met.
Yeah, so that's kind of part of my testimony of being a Christian. And so one of the things that I did when I was younger and not saved was I tested God a lot in very foolish ways. And I had been wrestling with him and asking if he was real and just praying about it. And I had noticed a church had just lit up their new cross on the very top of the church the day before my accident. And so top the hill, just had a really bad gut feeling. I told my buddy, by the way, he's sitting in the passenger seat, no seatbelt on, right? And I just told him, I said, man, you got to get your seatbelt on, or you're getting out of the car kind of deal, So he gets a seatbelt on. 15 seconds later, we top the hill, get hit head on by a drunk driver. Very bad head on collision. Seatbelt saved his life. Seatbelt saved mine. I remember my arm was shattered into pieces, 300 pieces. Hand was broken, knee and ankle out of socket. All that stuff. Looked up, saw that cross lit up, and I just felt like God was telling me, Brandon, I could have sent you to hell today. And instead, I'm giving you grace. And so I was even more bold, and I asked him to introduce me to somebody at that church, bring me to that church. And man, 3 weeks later, my wife and her friend walked through my parents' front door, and I'll never forget it. I looked straight at my mom as soon as I saw them, and I said, I'm going to marry one of those girls. I just know it. I just had a gut feeling, right? And so I introduced myself. She says, it's nice to meet you, that kind of thing. And then the first thing she asked me is, hey, do you want to go to church with me? I go to Harrisburg Baptist just down the street. And it's the exact church that I had the wreck in front of. So, needless to say, got her number. We started dating, and that was 22 years ago. I got saved, and we had an amazing time with like getting married and stuff. Like the guy that baptized me was also the guy that married me. And so, yeah, we just had a really healthy, wonderful marriage. And man, I just struck gold. That's what I tell everybody. I struck gold in high school and never looked back. So yeah, that's kind of my story with her.
Praise God. I mean, that is absolutely amazing. And it's like, how could you deny the existence of God when those kind of sequences happen?
Right. It's just it was too perfect. So
wow, that's miraculous. And so you guys have now been married 13 years. Tell me about your kids. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we have 2 children. My son Benjamin is 8 years old, and my daughter Bayla is 4. There's a little bit of difference in time between them, but your God has his timing and it's perfect. So we just trust in him, you know what I mean? But we love both of them. They're both smart, and they're both so unique in so many different ways. One, because Benjamin, obviously, he's a boy, and he's a he's a man or a wild kid at heart, and my daughter's just very gentle and loving and reminds me of just like my wife. She's basically my wife 2.0. So very, very excited to just love on them on a daily basis.
That's awesome. And I'm really curious to know, so you are a father, but I'm curious, like what got you into, what made you so passionate as a dad that you wanted to start a podcast?
Man, that is a great question. So me and three other guys, it's going to be Dustin, my twin brother Justin, and George. We have always just been really close friends, right? And one of the main things that we realized in our lives was that because of different traumas in childhood, or just because, how we are behaviorally, we would isolate. And it would make us weaker dads, or it would make us weaker husbands, or just friends in general. And when we were around each other, we noticed that we were keeping each other accountable, right? And so we were iron sharpening iron, so to speak. And one of the main things that just kept resounding is, there are so many dads that feel alone, that are suffering alone because, the status quo in our culture is, even when you're a kid, hey, men don't cry, we stuff it down kind of deal. And that's not how emotional intelligence or regulation or any of that stuff works. And so the more we got into that, the more we realized there are dads out there that need to be shown that there are ways to deal and cope with any aspect of their life, and they can build themselves up to be better fathers and better husbands, to be more present, to be more intentional. And it's amazing what happens when they start just learning these concepts. And so for us, it was an absolute mission of passion where we were like, we don't want any dad to ever feel alone in their situation, and we want to equip them with as much as we can to make them the best father, the best husband, because in turn it's going to send a ripple effect down generations. It's going to break generational curses, and traumas. And then, it's something that is going to make our world better one family at a time. The nuclear family has just, been on full attack for decades. And so our mission is to make sure that we keep it safe and, kind of let the pendulum swing back to the correct side.
Wow, that is such a statement. Make the world better one family at a time. And boy, you are right about the nuclear family being under attack. We're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it in our schools. We're seeing it just everywhere. This modern culture just doesn't seem to value a family unit. They don't realize the importance, I would say, of a family unit and how important it is to our society, how it is important, not only emotionally, but also cognitively for children. There's just so many things that are impacted by that unit. And we do see the ripple effects are happening all over right now. Today, we're seeing, and I'm so grateful for people like you, Brandon. I just want to say that, man, you guys are carrying the torch. I'm so grateful, and I'm really glad to have you on. So tell me, I love this iron sharpens iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are being present with one another. You're doing the work together. And I really agree. Like it's easy as dads to isolate. Things start getting tough. We start isolating and we suffer because of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, what are maybe some of the things that you and in your little tribe here of dads, what have you guys been able to help each other go through?
Man, so the accountability thing is going to be one of the top things that we've been doing, just trying to make sure that we equip ourselves as dads so that we can model the proper examples. We call it climbing the mountain of fatherhood together. That's kind of our slogan for our podcast. So, for me personally, I keep a bunch of these guys, especially my brother and George, we keep each other accountable, and we say, I'll call him and say, hey, look, how's it going this week? How are we being intentional? Like, how are we addressing this situation? And one of the things that I've learned as a dad who loves his children fiercely is that we have to humble ourselves enough to know when we need to grow in a certain area.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
So, like, I have to be intentional with my children's heart. And it's like one of the most crucial things we can do as a parent, besides, showing them Christ and giving them our time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those single three things will determine the outcome of their lives. literally. And so we always try to grow like the 1% a day type thing, like I die to myself on a daily basis. I try to root out what is bad in me. And man, listen, sometimes rooting out what's bad is painful because you have to visit your past, you have to visit traumas. But man, when you can be so emotionally regulated and intelligent in yourself, your children can learn that by your modeling. And you can also be a healthier person as a husband, as a brother, all these things. And so if there's such a ripple effect that occurs when you work on yourself, and that just makes you a better, more intentional leader as well. So
man, I love that so much. I want to pick back up on that accountability, and then something that you really touched on where you're talking about being humble enough, being willing to know and even bold enough to know when you need to grow for your children. Starting with the accountability piece. That is, in my experience now, you can learn so many things. You can read a book, you can take a workshop, you can go to a course, you can put in some incredible information and it can have impact. But if you don't have any accountability to make sure that you start living what you know, you go right back into this hypnotic rhythm and you fall back into your old ways so quickly. If you're not talking to someone, like you're able to talk with your brother and able to talk to these guys and say, hey, are we doing that? Are we working on that thing we talked about last week? So powerful, brother. I really love that. And then this piece here where I've got to highlight this, and I want you to kind of go in there a little bit with me. Sure. So being humble enough to know and really knowing when you need to grow. How do you think, everybody has an experience that says, man, I could have did that better, or something like that. Sometimes they repeat it over and over and over until they go, okay, I'm at rock bottom and now I'll learn the lesson. But what do you think is a great cue or indicator for yourself when you know you need to grow?
Man, with growth. So growth, first of all, is a mindset. Okay. And one of the things that I ask my kids or my friends that I'm holding accountable is, are you interested in it or are you committed to it?
Ooh.
Because if you're interested, you'll make all the excuses in the world. But if you're committed, you've counted the cost. You've seen exactly where you need to grow. Okay, now I have to do it and I'm committed to do it. And so when motivation fails, discipline kicks in. So I always ask myself that. But I think the thing that triggers a lot of people's need for growth is usually one of two things. Their pain is greater than the comfort that they were using as an excuse to get, to have no growth. Or the growth is so necessary that it's pushed upon them. Like life situations can throw things in and cause you to have to change. Like some people don't expect to be dads, but when they take the challenge on, it grows them whether they want to or not. Absolutely. And so there's a couple of situations there, but yeah, I think you just have to be committed and you have to know either through pain or through experience when you need to grow.
That is such a wonderful and powerful distinction. Are you interested or are you committed? That's also kind of a closer line right there. I think that's a pretty good sales line. Are you interested in this or are you committed to it? That is right. That is a wonderful distinction. I've been working with a number of dads, and something that I've noticed, because I work with guys on anger and impatience. And that's a really common thing when it comes to being a dad. And what I work with them on is noticing what's behind the anger. Yeah. And I think the anger can be such a powerful cue for what you need or you value that you're really struggling to get. It's just it's almost like I think of it as like if a submarine is down below and things are not happening that the submarine needs, right? The red light is going to go off. Yeah. And if you don't attend to what it needs, it's going to keep going off. Yeah. Right. And when you finally get in there and go, okay, what I'm experiencing is all this anger, but underneath it's like, I really need, or I really value something that I'm not getting right now. And I need to figure out how to do it in a healthy way, how to communicate in a healthy way, how to help myself achieve it in a healthy way, how to ask for support,
Yeah.
when I need it. And so I think, for me, it's been a big experience for myself. I dealt with anger a lot and went to anger management for 12 weeks. And I entered myself in it because I could feel my heart. This is a place I need to grow for my kids. I can't snap at my kids all the time. This is reasonable, and I just can't do it.
Yeah. And as a dad, the way I see it is, with anger especially, is we can either help our children's light shine brighter, or we can dim it just as easily.
Mm-hmm.
And your child should matter more than your pride, more than your emotions, your ego. And, especially the ego, man, the last one right there, you got to kill your ego, because the ego is going to be the root of, I would say, 9 times out of 10, all the things that you get angry about. Like, you feel like something's unfair. You've got the victim mentality instead of the victor. And so for me personally, like, when I feel like I'm getting angry, I take just a second. I do a 5-second pause. I take a breath in, and I say, why am I suddenly triggered into anger? What is prompting that? And so, like, if I have the time, I'll deep dive in. Okay, what's unhealthy here that's causing this? Like, is there a boundary I'm not realizing somebody's crossing, or is there something? So, like, I'll always question the situation to try to grow from it, and I think that's one way that we learn to be less angry. Understanding somebody else's story, or especially with your kids, like, it's really easy to get mad at your kid, but it's also really hard to realize that they don't have all the puzzle pieces.
Absolutely
We
not.
have this huge, large puzzle piece, and we see it and we just assume people should know it. That's a natural inclination for us as parents. But, like, our kids are missing so many of those puzzle pieces. And so, like, I'll always ask my kid, okay, what is it about what I've told you to do that you don't understand? And I'll ask it, I'll pause, and I'll be calm, and I'll let them respond, because there could be something that's underneath that's genuinely a good intention, and we're about to punish them for it. And so you're dimming that light, and so you have to be careful with your kids, especially with your anger. So, man, yeah, my patience has grown so astronomically since I became a father, especially when you have 2, because the chaos just kind of doubles. But yeah, so I would say, just again, you got to work on yourself, and you got to be careful about dimming your children's light.
Wow. And by the way, you were full of some very powerful statements. Your child should matter more than your ego. I hope you'll let me borrow that one. That
Absolutely.
is
Hey, listen,
statement.
the guys on the podcast call me the philosopher and the professor.
You are so good. That's great.
I'm used to that. But
yeah.
You
You mentioned something too, where I think of Stephen Covey. I believe he's the one that said, we judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions.
Yeah.
And with our children, we do that all the time. And it's like, if you take a pause and you try to dig in and figure out what the child's intentions are, you're almost always like, oh, I'm kind of the jerk here.
Yeah.
Kids don't have terrible intentions generally. They're just trying to get by. And I always think about the fact that children they're not miniature adults.
No.
They're children. They're missing those components that you spoke of. They don't have that full puzzle. What are some of the ways in which you mentioned patience? You've had to grow tremendously in patience, but what are some of those things that you had to face, your own internal, challenges that you had to overcome for your children?
Oh man, distractions and anxiety. So a great example, let's dive into distractions first. Flat out, I just had to learn to give them my time. I mean, how much have you given your time to something that you enjoy, like gaming, or, going out and being social, whatever, but it accomplishes absolutely nothing but personal satisfaction. You've wasted days or even years on most things like that. And you have to be willing to be intentional with that time with your children or with your wife, because if you don't create, I mean, obviously you want to have balance. There's self-care is super important. So don't misunderstand me here. Self-care is super important, but you have to be able to balance your time and schedule out your time where you have intentional time with your children and your wife. And I'm not talking about like sitting next to them on your phone. I'm talking about
Right.
genuine eye contact and effort, because it's literally the only thing that kids really feel they need. There are two things in their lives: their parents. They just want your attention. They want you to look at them, be acknowledged, and spend time with them. That's it. Like cars, houses, all that stuff that we worry about, they don't worry about that stuff. And so we have to realize that. And
Mhm.
for me, wasting time and that it's just, man, it's the only thing that we can't get back. And it's one of the most precious things that we can give to others. And why would we not give it to our children? And so I had to die to myself, the selfish ways of myself before I had kids, when I had Benjamin. And it just has continuously grown throughout the time. So yeah, I would say wasting time, and then anxiety, just having to have more faith that, hey, a lot of things aren't in my control, and that's okay. God's going to take care of what I don't. And, I have to, whatever happens, whatever adversity happens, I just have to face it, knowing that I can solve any issue that I can in one part of it, and the rest is just going to be, my family, my community, God, any of those aspects are going to take care of the rest for me. So, I for me, it's those two things. Those are the two things that stick out for me. Now, I would like to ask you a question. What about yourself? Like, what was
Yeah.
something that defined you?
Well, first, I want to say a couple things real quick because
Sure,
I
sure.
would love to answer that question. The first thing is, I've always heard this, and I think it is so true. But they say, "How do you spell love?"
Mhm.
Right? Time.
Mm,
Kids, that's how you spell love. If you want to spell
absolutely.
love to your kids, it's time. That's how you
Yeah.
spell love. And what I've learned over the years now is something like what you just said about how you spend it with your wife or your kids. It's not about being in the same space. You might share space, but you're not
Sure.
present. And quality over quantity is a big deal
Yeah.
here. 10 minutes of eye to eye, heart to heart, sharing an actual experience in a moment with a child is worth far more than an hour of you two sitting in the same room on devices.
Yep. And
So,
and like you said, it's not hard to fill their cup. So they have a power cup and they have a love cup,
yeah,
and you have to fill that daily.
yes, you
And
do.
like you said, 10, 15 minutes of genuine time fills that cup and it
Yes.
overflows. Same with power. That's why rough and like Jordan Peterson talks about this. He says, from 0 to 4, rough and tumble play with your children is one of the most vital things that you can teach them socially, because it gives them that feeling of power and it allows them to
Mhm.
learn to socialize and test boundaries and figure out where they are. And so that just, it ripples straight into their young boyhood or womanhood and all these things. And so, yeah, I could go
You,
into it a whole lot, but that's just the surface level of it for sure.
Absolutely. And I talk all the time about belonging and significance. That's what we're talking about
Mm,
here. We're talking about love and power.
yep,
Belonging is that connected feeling. It's the feeling that they're connected to you. They
yep,
need that so badly. They need to be connected and feel that sense. And generally kids that are acting out, what's funny is when they're attention seeking, when they're acting out, you might be in a public space, you might be at an event, it's because they don't feel connected to somebody,
right,
and they're trying to figure out how can I get someone's attention to
right,
connect with me. And
right,
the significance piece, kids are power struggling, they're arguing, they're being
yep,
argumentative, they're saying they don't want to do it that way. What they're really trying to say is I haven't felt powerful all day.
right,
Somebody's told me what to do every step of the way. And what you did, Brandon, when you said that when you are working through something where you're like, which part of it are you struggling to understand? When you ask that question, a lot of parents, and I fell in this category too, is like you want to stuff in. You're thinking you got to tell, and you miss the nuances of what they're missing because you're not asking. And a
right,
great way to give children power is to ask. Asking
right,
questions gives them a little bit more authority. Obviously, you can't ask them everything. There are times when you need to tell, but we tell our kids more often than we need to. My most popular video online is about asking versus telling.
yep,
And it just hits home for people because it's like kids are told when to wake up, when to go to sleep, what to eat, what to wear, what not to wear, what to do, what not to do all day, not just
yep,
from you, but from teachers, siblings, caregivers. Everyone is telling them
yep,
what to do. What would you do if you were in their shoes, right? You would
right,
likely start to tune people out. And when
and,
you ask a child, instead of telling my son, for example, go brush your teeth, I will say, what do you need to do next to be ready for school? And when he says, "Oh, go brush my teeth," I go, "All right, that's good thinking."
Right.
So like I
Right.
can ask him.
Right. And the other thing, that the other side of that coin is you're teaching them critical thinking skills,
Mhm.
and you're allowing them to look at themselves. A lot of kids will not give inward reflection. And if you can teach them that, that also helps with the emotional dysregulation that they're having when their behavior is like that, when they're acting out. That negative behavior will get them attention, right? And
Mhm.
so the brain is telling them, just do the negative stuff.
Yeah, this
But if you
works.
ask them, yeah, you let them evaluate, okay, but I still get a negative consequence. So, like, I'll ask my son, what does a good choice give you? And he says, it gives me praise and attention. I said, what does a bad, action give you? And he says, a consequence. And I said, so which one do you want to pick?
Mhm.
I let him choose. And
Yeah.
sometimes he's not, he picks
Right.
the wrong one. And
He's gonna choose the other one. Yeah.
we make a memory that he doesn't want, but
Yeah.
it's okay. It's something that he has to learn, sometimes the hard way, just like we all do. I give him tons of grace and compassion, because I've got a buddy of mine. We talked on our podcast with, his name's John Michael Clark, brilliant guy, has a family coaching thing called the Family Captain, and he labels it the 3 legs of leadership, and it's responsibility, compassion, and then authority. And so you have to, like, usually guys are weak in one of them. And most dads that are very authoritative are weak in compassion. And most compassionate dads are weak in authority. So you've got to learn to find balance between those 3 legs. And then you can stand as a strong leader.
That's
Um,
so good. Yeah,
but yeah, so
asking them and then about, which choice do they want to make, and helping them think through it so they are becoming more self-referential, so they are being able to see from the inside out. The word parent, the actual root, that word meant to draw out. So it
I
actually
love it.
means to pull out. And, it seemed like Socrates must have had this down with his Socratic dialogue. He must have understood that, people don't really like to be told, but they love to be asked and they love to consider. And today we live in a world where everyone's looking outside of themselves to be validated. Everyone's looking outside of themselves to see if they can get a follower, to get a like, to do all these things. But, what do they think? How do they feel about themselves? How do they, and children need to be taught this at an early age so that they don't fall victim to, being so influenced by peers and so influenced by the mainstream. It's like, well, everybody's doing it. It's like, yeah. And it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing a lot of bad in the world. Doesn't mean we should do it. So I love that we can do this with our kids, even through just questions, asking your kids questions, digging in a little bit with them. That's great. So you asked me a question.
Yeah.
You asked me so anger was a big thing for me, and I had to work through trauma. I grew up in a house. I was one of 5 kids with my parents. But they split, and there's more kids, and there's just all these kids. So ultimately there was like 8 of us in total. And my parents were heavy-handed disciplinarians. I'll just say it that way. My mom had a paddle. It had all of our names on it, and she was not afraid to use it. And my dad had a belt, and I knew when that belt came off, but it was not going to be a good time. And then my grandparents were the kind of grandparents where, respect was like really, really, really demanded. It was respect backed with fear. It wasn't respect because I admired them, although I did, but it was respect that was like, you will respect me or else. And I remember one of the 2 experiences happened to me that were traumatizing. And one of them was, I was riding with my grandfather and my grandmother, and we go to get out at a store, and we get out of the car, and my grandmother asked me to do something or asked me a question, and I didn't respond, yes, ma'am. And whenever I turned around, I just looked, and my grandfather popped me right in the mouth. And I was like, whoa. And I remember just being so shocked. My system was just like, I can't believe I just got hit, by my grandfather. And another time, another grandfather of mine, thumped me in the back of the head. He was a thumper. So, you did something wrong, he would just knock you right in the back of the head. And so I had to work through all this trauma, because when I had my son, I didn't want to be that kind of dad. I knew I didn't want to do that. But
Right.
whenever the rubber met the road, all of my trauma showed up. And I
Yeah.
started yelling. I started, spanking, and I just felt terrible about it. And I wasn't getting a good result from it. I spent 2 years trying what I call the old school tactics. I spanked, I grounded, I yelled, I punished. Basically, I was using
Yeah.
punishment. And I put myself, well, first I started picking up books. I started buying parenting books. I read Parenting with Love and Logic. And I had such an amazing response from my child from doing something that was counterintuitive to me, which was to use a melodic voice.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I remember hearing that and I was like, melodic voice. Yeah, I'm the drill sergeant, Dad. You listen to
Right.
me.
Right.
Like, I'm Mr. Drill Sergeant. And when I tried it, my son responded so well. My brain was like, maybe I should read a little bit more of this book. Maybe there is actually more to this whole parenting idea here. And so I started
Yeah.
digging in, and eventually I worked on being softer, more caring, more
Mm-hmm.
connected, more loving, more patient. And then I knew what I should do, but I still struggled. So I did do anger management. I did 12
Good.
weeks, a 12-week anger management program, which was really helpful. It taught me all kinds of things about anger and how to understand my anger. And one of the instructor told us one day, he says, it's called anger management, not anger resolution. And that's for a reason. You
Right.
will never get rid of anger. Anger is something
Right.
we all have. It's there for a reason. You got to learn how to use it, how to manage it.
Right.
So anyway, so I did that. And that has been the backbone of my work. Through that work, and through all of the courses and the education, the materials I went through, all of the therapy I went through to work on the little kid me that had been kind of traumatized through that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
doing all of that work, it improved my relationship with my son, and our relationship improved his
Mm.
behavior. His behavior was improved by the relationship, not because he had to
Right.
change and I didn't.
Right. And that's one of the things that I talk about and we preach on our podcast often, is that's a result of intentionality and presence, is that you are healing. Like anytime we discipline our children, we are losing or breaking that connection, even if it's temporarily. And when you actually bond and you heal that connection, it's a respective power, not a coerced power.
Exactly.
It's like kings were the same way with their kingdoms. It was better to be loved than feared, because you had more long-term loyalty. You had people that genuinely wanted to learn and follow you. And so it's the same with your own kingdom, with your own household. You have to be intentional so that you can have a good connection. And not just that, but you're going to make your kid parent oriented instead of peer oriented.
Yes.
Because if they're not getting the love from you and the attention from you, they're going to their peers. And let me tell you, their peers don't know jack squat about the world. And they're going to teach them all the wrong things. And the world is going to be a lot more brutally harsh to them than you would be, because you're going to give them grace and compassion. So it is absolutely our responsibility and our job to be intentional and present. And that's one of the driving factors for sure.
Yeah, a fantastic book on this is Hold On to Your Kids. Is that
Neufeld.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
fantastic book. And when your kids are peer oriented, he relates it to the blind leading the blind. I mean, these kids have no moral compass.
Yep.
They're not the mentor that these children need. And as you said, life is going to be far more harsh than you would be. Man, that is so good. Yeah, the relationship for me is the foundation. I tell people all the time, if your correction exceeds your connection, you're going to have problems.
I love that.
That is such a recipe for problems right there. I don't care if that's your subordinates at work, that's your wife, that it doesn't matter who it is. If you are correcting them more often than you're connecting with them, you are in for some heat.
Yeah, I felt that heat for quite a while, just because I am the kind of person who is so analytical that I'm almost a perfectionist. And so I am other people perfectionist too. So like that self-criticalness that I had was also something that was also critical to others. And so I had to learn to become healthy in that as well. So there was a lot of growth for me in that area. And that started with just me and my wife. And then the kids just exacerbated that growth that much further, just because I knew how much they would need that. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And I share that temperament with you. I'm extremely critical of myself, and also it ends up coming out onto others. And I have a shameless plug, but we have a great quiz on the website where you can actually take a disposition quiz. And what this is it's going to tell you which of the 4 personality profiles you are. Are you superior, controlling? Are you pleasing, or are you comfort? And this is backed by some really great science. And it doesn't mean that you're pigeonholed into one. In fact, we usually have them prioritized in a certain way, and we usually show one or more in different environments, right?
Sure.
But I have superior and controlling as my profiles. And when you go on there, and if you take it, it's going to tell you about your strengths and liabilities, because there is no one is better than the other, right?
Right.
Everything can be used as a strength, but sometimes strength can be overused. The Greeks called this the virtuous mean, in which even virtue, if too much of something is too much of something, right? And too little is too little. There's always this point at which it's really good, but if it's overused, it can be a negative.
Right. It can go from healthy to unhealthy, and even your strengths can be healthy, but they can also be unhealthy in certain situations. So yeah, I 100% agree with that, and it also it bleeds into what chapter of life that you and your family are in.
Yes.
Your teenager might not be receptive to a certain parenting style that you used as when they were kids,
Right.
because they're different. And to grow around kids is to watch 1,000 funerals, as that psychologist said. Each
Such a
person is
great
dying
point.
they die to themselves, on a daily basis. And so yeah, with kids you have to be adaptive, but you also have to, you have to be anticipatory. So one of the things that being a provider, like when, dads are labeled providers, right? And the literal sense of provide is to see before. And so one of the things that we have to do as dads is we have to be able to discern and anticipate our children and our wives, their goals, how their lives are, their needs, their dangers, their temptations, especially with, teenage children. So there's a lot of things there that, we just have to be vigilant with. So
you talked about intentionality, and speaking about being a provider and anticipating. I ran a personal and professional development company for a while, and it was shut down kind of during COVID, unfortunately. But during that time, we did a deep dive into why our company was going to be different than any other company, and we reduced it down to one word, and that word was thoughtfulness. And the reason is because we wanted to understand our clients, their experience, what being thoughtful about how they are going through their day, what they value, what's showing up for them, what could be coming ahead, that they're going to worry about, what could be coming ahead that they have desires for, and just being very thoughtful. And I remember as we continue to deep dive that, it just showed up in my home. I just thought, I just want to be thoughtful for my family. I want to be thoughtful for my children. I want to be, practice this. And it is an intentionality. I want to be intentional for these people. It's very easy to get pulled into the hypnotic rhythm. And I got that word from Outwitting the Devil from Napoleon Hill. And he talks about how life has, we come to the same home, we do these things, we go to the same job, et cetera. And it has a way of hypnotizing us.
Yeah.
And if we don't stay intentional, if we don't stay present to that, we might, for example, treat our children as if they were still those little kids, not recognizing that they're in a different season of their life. Yeah. And we have a rule in our house. We get to hit the hard reset. So, I going to video gaming, if, everything went haywire, or even your computer, if stuff just isn't working, we can unplug it, give it 10 seconds and plug it back in, and things seem to work. And with my kids, and it's like, hey, if we've started to get that haywire experience, we're just going to do a hard reset. And this has been an amazing tool. I just want to give you fresh eyes. I would love that in return. And I just want to hit the reset button with you and just wipe the slate clean and let us start over. And, everybody needs that. We if we hold on to that resentment, we just keep mistreating people, but everybody deserves to have that slate wiped clean so they can become new, so they can let that past die and be their new self.
Right. And a great way to do that as a dad is to take them to nature without technology. Let nature reset the prefrontal cortex, let them be out there, they're in stillness. One of the things we talked about in one of our previous episodes is that kids are in such a short attention span because of all the stuff that's on their tablets, their phones, all this stuff, that they don't sit still. Boredom is painful for them.
Right.
And so they have to be somebody who is forced to be still and forced to be bored, even if it's just momentarily. And that helps create that resiliency that we see and that growth when they come stagnant, because all that's happening for us or our kids is we love to be comfortable as human beings. And when we find comfort in something, we don't want to get out of our shell. And comfort is where, dreams and goals and things go to die. And so we have to purposely put ourselves out of our comfort zones. And going back to the intentionality thing, the reason why it's such an important word for me, and it's the thing that we really create as a foundation, is intentionality prompts determination. It prompts action. It prompts, most importantly, effort. Effort is the thing that intentionality does, because it forces you to take effort, to take action. And so that's why it's such an important thing for me, and especially for my children. Because, some of the goals that I want for my kids is I want them to have a ton of good core memories. And I want them to be successful in school, which my wife being a school teacher, that, she's got that down pat. So I'm good in that section. But going back to parent orientation, I want to make sure that they're there. And, they need to have rites of passage, like going back to what you were talking about, the rites of passage. Like right now, society as a whole has nothing that's good. Like it's for guys in their teenage years is when they first have sex, or grades, like we're in high school now, or senior year, or whatever. It's like, that's not real rites of passage, man. What I'll do is I'll sit down with my kid and say, okay, you're in young boyhood. I'm going to give you more responsibility. And with that responsibility comes better rewards. And, I say, we're going to have to do something that you're scared of. And that'll be the initiation process, kind of like the old societies used to do. And so it kind of pushes them out of that comfort zone, makes them intentional themselves, and then helps them to grow outside of that comfort zone. And that's where we really want them to be as much as we can before we cut them loose. Right. So,
man, that is so good. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're missing this element in our experience. I've done a number of men's work events, and I was able to go through my own very own rite of passage. And it wasn't until I was like 27 years old. And, it's a very powerful thing that should be held by the elders. Your parents should be there. There should be an experience there that really recognizes where you're at and what you're going through. And I love that you're saying, let's just give you a challenge. You need a challenge to go through in this. Yeah. In my family, one of the things I tell the boys is privilege is equal to responsibility. If you want more privilege, you got to be more responsible. And it's just like this. It's every person who has incredible privilege has incredible responsibility. And that's the way I tell them. I say, I want you to have privilege. It's just, you got to show me some responsibility, because then I know you can handle it. Then I know you're going to do the right thing with it. Right. If it's misguided, it's just going to cause you pain. And honestly, I would not be doing you a service by allowing that. So,
right. It's actually, true love is giving them hard truth and having them grow from the pain and truth, than to spare them and they not grow. And then they have to, again, they face the world, and the world is so much more brutal about it. And so, yeah, man, growth is, like I said, it's not fun sometimes, and sometimes it can even be painful, but we have to understand that life is going to have adversity. It's not going to be fair. Like my kid, he's 8. So, obviously his 8-year-old mindset is, well, that's not fair. It's like, son, if you think that you don't have fair, start stacking the gratitude, start stacking the things that you do, the blessings you do have, because right now you're sitting in one of the best countries in the world. You're one of the safest kids in the world. You're probably one of the wealthiest because of his parents, and, where we're at as America as a whole. Yep. And, there's kids that are dying from lack of food and water.
Yes.
And he's sitting here complaining about a toy.
Yeah.
Not fair. So it's like that perspective is just flawed. And so I try to help him gently, of course, but I do try to give him like, hey, look at this kid. And I show him a kid drinking water out of a mud pool. And I'm like, this is this kid's water. And you've got clean water on command from our refrigerator. I mean,
Right.
how is your life not fair? Come on, bud. I know it's
Yeah.
perception. I understand that he's perceiving things, but
Yeah.
I just want to kind of wake him up to some of his perceptions are just misguided.
Of course.
And that's natural.
He's missing that puzzle. You're helping put in another piece of that puzzle.
Exactly.
Let
Exactly.
we all need a little perspective and be brought elevated up a little bit. And you're so right. Any of us, even adults, need to remember when we start saying it's not fair, it's not fair. We need to remember how where we're at. We need that reminder too. So
Yep.
it's not, this isn't even just little kid stuff. So many of us do. So that's fantastic. I really am, what's showing up for me is I'm really curious. Where did you learn all this stuff, Brandon? You're just an incredible wealth of knowledge. And I'm curious, what were the books, the influencers? Where did you learn all this?
Buddy, so I've been just the weird outcast kid since I was probably 7 or 8. My friends would be wanting to go play basketball, and I was talking about stuff I read in the encyclopedia, or from books. Like when I wouldn't socially fit in, and I know this is probably embarrassing, but I don't care anymore. I would read books on being social, because like when I couldn't figure out something myself, like my dad was gone Monday through Friday providing for our family, and my mom was just so busy with my 3 other brothers. I was the well-behaved one. So where was I? Right. I was by myself. And so I didn't have a lot of guidance in that aspect. I mean, sure, don't get me wrong. My parents were amazing. My childhood was amazing. I felt very loved, but just from a time perspective, I didn't have a lot of that intentionality. So it was me isolated by myself. And so, yeah, I turned to books. And books, man, reading is one of the best things we can do besides learning how to properly communicate and regulate ourselves. So for me, like, I just have this unsatiable desire to constantly learn, and I'll master something, I'll move on to the next. I'll master it, move on to the next. And I just keep doing that. And I do it consistently every day. And it compounds just like anything else. Like you'll start to see, okay, this subject actually ties in really well with this subject. And you start getting just way better, more efficient at different things. And so for me, it's I have to do that because I also want to model that for my children. If they don't know something, I want them to go look it up. I'm going to go look this up. And like, I'll ask my kids when they get home from school, what'd you fail at today? And I'm like excited to hear, and they're like, nothing. And I kind of get a little disappointed, it's
right.
I want you to fail. I want normalization of failure.
Yeah.
I want you to feel like it's a totally normal thing to be successful. Failing is your first attempt in learning. Right.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. So for me, I'm constantly putting myself in a position where I'm having to learn something, and I do everything myself around my house and everything. So, it's
I resonate with you so deeply. I will have to say I was a bit more social, but at the same time, I know exactly what you mean. I've literally got 4 or 5 books rolling at any given time. There's not a surface in my house that I don't have a book that I'm not picking up and going through. And you're right. There's this aspect of how things dovetail into others, and you start to see the wisdom, how timeless wisdom really is. You start to realize how many people have spoken about certain archetypes or certain experiences. And in my house too, we talk about mistakes, and I call them mistakes. I got this from one of my mentors. I'm like, we're just going to take that over. And here's the deal. There's no one who's successful without making a mistake. You didn't learn how to walk without making a mistake. You didn't learn how to ride a bike without making a mistake. You didn't learn how to have a successful relationship. You certainly won't learn how to have a business. You will make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the formula for becoming successful. You must make them.
Right. And one of the things that I face a lot is, like, I read a book a week, sometimes 2 books a week. Like last year, I think I did like 123 books. Amazing. Which is crazy. It's a lot. I do audio. I do a lot of audio.
Yeah, I do too.
Just my job thankfully allows me to have time where I'm keying in numbers, doing something, I can just listen. Or when I'm working out, etc. I find prioritize time for it. But one of the things I tell people is, you have to realize that these authors have spent their whole life on this one subject that you get to learn about and master in a couple of hours. And they spent decades doing that. That's gold, man. Like, how would I not tap into that? Absolutely. Like, I'm literally living millennia of lifetimes in knowledge because
Yeah.
they've passed it to us. It's a legacy that was gifted to us. And then with technology and everything, it's just it's so easy to get for free and to have and to listen and to multitask. And it's like, why would I not capitalize on that? Like I'm just accepting mediocrity at that point if I don't. And so I hold myself accountable in that for sure.
Man, that is awesome. Well, I'm super grateful that you do this. I am, your family is incredibly blessed to have you constantly filling your tank because, man, your cup overfloweth. Like I can
Yeah.
tell you,
Oh yeah.
I took down some fantastic notes. I know my listeners are going to get a lot out of this. Guys, if you've enjoyed the show, please do like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to connect with Brandon, how would they do that? How can they get connected?
Yes. So I have, you can just look me up on any social media, Brandon Blinson. The last name is Blinson. I am also obviously one of the co-founders and co-podcasters of the Present Fathers podcast. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube. And in fact, on YouTube, our podcasts are actually live, real time. So you guys feel free to come on, ask us questions. You can bring up any kind of subject, and we'd love to touch on it if it helps a father out. So, we're mostly on those two platforms, but we're also on Twitter. We're on, different other platforms. So yeah, just hit us up through our podcast there. And yeah, and then eventually I'll have the book release and maybe I can come back on and tell you guys about it. And yeah, so that'll be another place, but.
Absolutely. Brandon, this has been a total honor. Guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.